This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform where entrepreneurs can easily create and customize their own personal or professional website. More on Squarespace later in the video.
So hello and welcome yet again to another episode of Geographics. I'm your interim host, Karl Smallwood, and today we're talking about the Statue of Liberty, a troublesome but enduring gift from France. And this video is based on an original article by Larry Holsworth, and if they provided social links for us, they'll be listed below alongside my own. But you know what? Let's get to it. So I normally like to have things knocking about that are referential to the video I'm doing on the day, but I've got nothing in my flat that's overtly American, so I thought I'll just drink coffee instead. You guys like that, right? The Statue of Liberty is arguably the most immediately recognisable symbol of America, yet it was not born from an American mind, and there was considerable resistance in America to its construction and dedication of the statue in America in the late 19th century. It was actually conceived by a French political leader, designed by a French sculptor, and its construction was supervised by a French engineer. Always intended to be a gift from France to the United States, the project encountered considerable resistance on both sides of the Atlantic. Funds and materials to complete the project were largely from donations, both in Europe and in America. Contrary to popular belief, the statue does not depict Columbia, the female personification of America, popular in the 19th century. Nor does she hold in her hand the famed sonnet by Emma Lazarus, which contains the lines, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore." Those lines actually appear on a plaque which contains the poem The New Colossus, once mounted in the pedestal for the statue. And for anyone curious about what the tablet actually says, it's just July 4th, 1776 in Roman numerals, aka Independence Day, linking the statue to the Declaration of Independence. It has been a symbol of the United States, of New York, of America's history of immigration, and of friendship between America and France. It has also appeared in films, television, as an inspiration, and frequently as evidence of the collapse of the American civilization during a fictional apocalypse. Its story is complicated, for more so than being a simple gift from one nation to another. Before and during the American Civil War, anti-slavery movements in France and Britain pressured both those nations' governments from intervening in North America on behalf of the Confederacy. In 1865, a leading French politician and writer, Edouard Laboulaye, applauded the recent end of slavery in the United States and suggested it be commemorated. Laboulaye discussed the idea of a statue with his friend, French sculptor and abolitionist himself, Frédéric Bartholdi. The sculptor was, at the time, considering a project to erect a large statue of an Egyptian woman to serve as a lighthouse at the entrance to the Suez Canal at Port Said in Egypt. So I hopefully got all those words pronounced correctly, because I actually did some research on this one. That project never really came to fruition, and in 1870, the Franco-Prussian War ended other political projects that Bartholdi had been planning. The war led to Alsace, Bartholdi's homeland, being annexed into Germany. Bartholdi, needing work and frustrated in France and bearing letters of introduction from Laboulaye, sailed to America in June 1971 to present a proposal for a statue to government officials in New York and Washington. At his arrival in New York, he sailed past what was then known as Bedloe Island, which held a disused American army post and pretty much nothing else. Bartholdi immediately recognised that all ships entering the New York harbour had to pass this island and selected it as the ideal site for such a statue. The proposal was to France to design and build the statue, and for the United States to select its site and erect a pedestal at its base. Although the pedestal was not yet designed when completed in 1886, the top of Liberty's torch towered at 305 feet, 1 inch tall above the ground. And here's a little bonus fact for people out there. A lot of people assume the statue is a lot bigger than it is, and this actually ended up impacting, of all things, the film Cloverfield. Specifically, the first teaser trailer shows the Statue of Liberty's head being knocked off and appearing on screen in front of the people, filming from the first person perspective. And people online, as they are wont to do, complain endlessly that the statue was too small to be realistic. And it turns out that it was based on the actual specifications of the Statue of Liberty, but people in their head think it's bigger than it is, so they had to CGI the head to make it bigger. And it's just another one of the examples of reality being less realistic than our imagination. Anyway, moving on. The statue would commemorate the Franco-American friendship and the recent end of slavery in America. President Ulysses Grant supported the idea, especially as the proposal included the collection of private donations for financial support. The statue itself was proposed as a depiction of Libertas, the ancient Roman goddess of freedom, called Liberty in English. Liberty was a common and popular symbol in America at the time. as she is to this day, appearing on many coins and in art. Bartholdi presented Liberty bearing a torch, symbolically lighting the world and giving the statue its name of Liberty, Enlightening the World. She was clad in a gown and cloak and a broken ball and chain at her feet, symbolising the end of slavery. And a little known detail about the statue, which is often just covered by the aforementioned gown, is that she's positioned with one foot before the other, symbolically stepping forward and away from slavery. On her head, Bartholdi crowned her with a diadem, further inspiration of enlightenment. 7 rays extended from the diadem, and their number has been suggested to refer to several different things. Some have speculated they reference the 7 seas of the world, others claim they refer to the 7 continents. Bartholdi himself didn't assign them any particular meaning, an indication that they were simply a visually appealing aspect of the design. Another Frenchman with a decidedly harder to pronounce name, Eugène Viollet-Diduc, an architect and friend of Bartholdi, proposed an internal pier constructed of brick and mortar to support the structure, to which the skin of the statue would be attached. The skin was to be of copper, selected because of its unique combination of flexibility and resistance to the elements. Bartholdi encountered, shall we say, resistance to the project in the United States. He travelled across the country by rail, discussing the idea with community leaders and influential businessmen, but found little in the way of any grassroots support for the plan. Remember, this is the plan for the construction of the Statue of Liberty. In France, support for the project also dwindled in the aftermath of the war with Prussia. France's economy suffered, and a large faction of monarchists who favoured the restoration of the House of Bourbon and the monarchy opposed the idea of individual liberty championed by Laboulaye and other republicans. In January 1871, the City Council of Philadelphia passed a resolution calling for the city to host an international exposition in 1876 as part of the national celebrations of the Centennial of the United States and the Declaration of Independence. The following year, Congress hastily passed an act which precluded the US government from any financial liabilities for the event, although it did enable Congress to grant loans backed by the Treasury to provide support. In 1872, Congress created the United States Centennial Commission and the Centennial Board of Finance. The first body, which included representatives from all of the states, was tasked with planning the event and the exhibits that it would present. The second had the more difficult task of finding ways to actually pay for all that. 10 million shares of stock were created, sold at an initial value of about $10. Additional funds were then raised by donations from both public and private entities, and Congress kicked in an additional $1.5 million in the form of a loan. In 1873, the Commission had representatives in Europe, inviting the industrialized nations to present exhibits during the event. In both Europe and the United States, interest in the Centennial grew steadily, and in 1875, Laboulaye and Bartholdi were confident enough that their project would be accepted to announce it formally as a gift from the people of France to the people of the United States. The gift was to be in honour of the nation's birthday rather than a celebration of the end of slavery in the United States. In France, construction of Bartholdi's statue began, though it was quickly evident that it would be in no way complete for the time of the expedition in Philadelphia. Nor were the Americans anywhere near having a site for its permanent display over in the United States. The Bedloe site favoured by Bartholdi was available since it was owned by the federal government, yet responsibility for building a pedestal for the statue to stand on was something few entities actually wanted to take on. In France, money needed to complete the statue was short of its goal by a lot. In 1875, French industrialist Eugène Secretan, a copper magnate, donated some 58,000 kilos of copper sheets for the statue to complete the work on it. And if anyone's thinking that sounds like a lot of copper, that was roughly half of what was needed. Bartholdi was, however, unable to secure more copper because he needed more paper. Bartholdi decided to move forward with construction of the right arm anyway, completing it with the torch it bears aloft, in hopes of completing it in time for display at the Philadelphia Exposition. In May 1876, Bartholdi arrived in the United States armed with large paintings depicting the proposed statue and smaller models for distribution to donors. The arm itself did not arrive until August, in the waning days of the exhibition, when it was erected despite not being listed in the official programming for the event. It did prove popular though, because you could climb to the top of it and see the entire grounds of the exhibition. So that was something, I suppose. Following this exhibition, Bartholdi returned to France to continue work on the statue. The arm was relocated to New York, where it stood in Madison Square Park, a central component of fundraising in the city for a pedestal and permanent home for the Colossus. In Paris, Bartholdi faced similar shortages of money and concentrated on completing the head and the crown, in the hope that it would be available for display at the Paris World Fair in 1878. The head proved just as popular as the arm had done in Philadelphia, and work on the statue moved forward. Work on the pedestal, however, did not.
I don't think this costume's working.
No, I think it's good. It fits the theme of the video.
But I look like the Burger King man. I'm just going to do it normally.
Alright, fine. Don't be fun.
This Geographics video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform perfect for newcomers and established businesses.
See, that would have looked so much more majestic if the torch was in the air. Sorry.
With every Squarespace website, you have the ability to customize everything using their Fluid Engine website design system. You can drag and drop elements, resize, recolor. Basically, you can customize your website any way you want. Stop pointing at the torch, it's fine. If you're thinking about starting an online course but don't know where to begin, Squarespace may be the solution for you. Once you've got your website looking exactly how you want it, you can then upload your lessons and decide how to sell them. You can offer your course as a subscription service or charge a one-time fee. My arm's killing from holding this book, so...
That's my book!
This is real pain. This is like acting. Oh, my wrist. You ever tried holding a book like that for 30 minutes?
Yes, that's how long this bit has taken us so far.
Squarespace also includes plenty of tools to complement your course. You can build a mailing list of your viewers and customers and run email campaigns whenever a new lesson is released. You can also track the success of your course using the analytics page. Keeping an eye on your website traffic will help you better understand how to reach a wider audience.
Can you at least pick up the book and pause for the end bit?
Why don't you do it?
Check out squarespace.com/geographics for 10% off on your first purchase of a website or domain using the code GEOGRAPHICS. See? Majestic.
See, idiot.
Now, both the arm and head of the statue, completed by 1878, had been built under the supervision of the aforementioned Viollet-le-Duc. In 1879, the Viollet-le-Duc took ill, and his contributions to the project came to an end with his death in September. He left the project with unclear plans of how he intended to actually connect the copper skin to the complete statue to the concrete pier designed to support it. Bartholdi then decided to solicit the services of Gustave Eiffel, an engineer famed for his bridges. You see, that you thought we were going to say the Eiffel Tower, didn't you? But the Eiffel Tower wouldn't actually be constructed for another 10 years, so I was also caught off by that, so don't blame yourself if you were. Anyway, Eiffel decided to do away with the internal pier entirely and instead support the copper skin with an iron framework. To attach the skin to the iron frame, he devised a secondary frame connected to the main frame with flexible straps. He used similar straps to attach the secondary frame to the skin through pads made of asbestos. The arrangement allowed the skin of the statue to flex and move in accordance with the wind and temperature changes, meaning the Statue of Liberty actually does move, just ever so slightly. Using Eiffel's system, the entire statue could yield slightly in high winds. Eiffel, in effect, had created one of the earliest examples of a method of construction known as curtain wall, in which the outer shell of a structure is not load-bearing, the load is instead carried so by an internal skeleton. It's not like a skeleton like we have, it's an iron framework that they attach everything to, as mentioned. Eiffel also included a pair of spiral staircases, allowing visitors to climb to the very top of the statue's head and its torch. Until Eiffel's innovations, Bartholdi had actually planned to build the Statue of Liberty on site once the internal pier was erected on the pedestal. The materials for its construction would be shipped to Bedloe Island via France. However, there were still no firm plans for the erection of the pedestal. Bartholdi decided to build the statue in France, and once conditions were right in the United States, like disassemble it, take it apart, ship it to America, and then rebuild it all. As Eiffel worked on the frame in his factory in Paris, numerous skilled craftsmen across France began shaping the copper sheets, after which they were sent to Eiffel and connected to the frame. With the torch, arm, and head already completed, work on the statue began literally from the ground up. By 1882, it was about 50% complete, which sounds terrifying, just half of a 300-foot tall lady. The sections of copper that form the skin were made by skilled craftsmen using hammers and shapers to pound the designs from the drawings into the requisite shape from heated sheets of thin copper. Thus, the entire skin of the statue was shaped from hot metal by hand by French and Italian craftsmen in workshops scattered throughout France and Belgium. Laboulaye died in 1883, and his position as the driving force for political and financial support was taken over by Ferdinand de Lesseps, another engineer who had led the construction of the Suez Canal. His prestige was quite considerable at the time, and as the statue neared completion and reunited with its arm and torch, de Lesseps announced that the French government would bear the cost of shipping the statue to New York once the city was ready to receive it. On President Grant's last day in office, March 3, 1877, he signed a joint resolution of Congress which authorised the President to accept the statue as a gift. The following day, his successor, Rutherford B. Hayes, announced that the Bedloe Island site would be the permanent home of the statue. Thus, the burden for the construction of the pedestal fell on the statue's committee of supporters in New York City. The New York committee assumed the name of the American committee, but unfortunately they remained quite short of funds. They also remained short of public support. Again, for the Statue of Liberty. Now, the New York Times offered the opinion that the French should have included the pedestal as part of the gift. Remind the pedestal a little bit. The statue was the massive bit on top that cost all the money to make. And the influential Harpers Weekly agreed, arguing that the French should have given the statue and the pedestal at once. Conservatives in state legislatures and Congress opposed any government support whatsoever for the project. Donations dwindled as the economy suffered through several downturns, called at the time panics. Philadelphia and Boston committees organised to support acceptance of the statue and helpfully offered to pay for construction of the pedestal, if the pedestal was relocated to their city. In New York, the committee, which included a young Theodore Roosevelt, hired a noted architect, Richard Morris Hunt, to develop designs for the pedestal. Hunt's designs went through numerous changes, incorporating both modern imagery and ancient references. And I just love the idea that the only way to get this statue built was to just tell New York, well, Boston wants it. And it's like, well, we better get on it then. Meanwhile, as Hunt wrestled with ideas, fundraising to pay for the pedestal itself began in earnest. The American Committee created various events and auctions to raise money, one of which included commissioning a work from the poet Emma Lazarus. Lazarus, although initially reluctant to participate, did eventually write The New Colossus, with its famed lines about the tired and the poor yearning to live free, mentioned in the intro. Still, money remained short. The New York legislature passed $50,000 in support for the project in 1884, and Governor Grover Cleveland vetoed it. Congress failed to act at the national level, and by late 1884, work on the pedestal, which had begun with excavations for the foundations in 1883, was suspended. The completed statue waited in a Paris suburb. And that's where you get those great pictures, which we can hopefully show here, of just the Statue of Liberty just chilling in France. Like, they just had it. Imagine that. So we made you this nice gift, and it's just there, and they can't do anything with it. That would have been really gutting, that, wouldn't it? With work on the pedestal suspended and the American Committee virtually out of money, Joseph Pulitzer, publisher of the influential New York World, then the largest circulation newspaper in America, entered the fray. Pulitzer announced a fund drive in which every contributor, no matter how small an amount they actually gave, would have that fact listed alongside their name in the World. Pulitzer later expanded the promise to include publishing the letters and notes he received accompanying donations, many of which were likely fictionalized. He named donations coming from newsboys and shoeshine boys who wished to remain anonymous. According to his records, bars and taverns collected donations for patrons and then forwarded them to the World. Encouraged by the popular support, the committee organised work to resume on the pedestal in late 1884. Politicians also took note of public sentiment, and support grew in legislature in New York, as well as in Congress, but no funds were forthcoming. Former President Grant even tried to use his prestige to lobby business contacts for financial support, with limited success. Pulitzer announced a goal of about $100,000 for his fund drive, which, for those curious, amounts to about $3.1 million in 2022, when this video was based on was written. He repeated his call for donations in every issue of the World for 5 straight months, and on August 11th, 1885, Pulitzer announced that donations had exceeded $102,000. And his drive to raise funds had actually done more than just, collect money. New York developed a competitive desire to complete the statue with public support for the project throughout all levels of society, from the newest immigrant to the society matrons of Fifth Avenue. In France, the statue was painstakingly disassembled in parts carefully marked for reassembly before being crated. They were then transferred by rail to the French port of Rouen, more than 200 crates containing some 350 parts of the statue, as they were loaded into the hold of the French Navy steamship the Isere. Isere arrived in New York on June 17, 1885, where it was welcomed by harbour boats, cheering crowds ashore, and planned celebrations scheduled 2 days later. On June 19th, the Isere was escorted by US Navy warships to Bedloe Island, where military salutes and celebrations marked the arrival of the statue. All that remained was to complete the statue and mark the occasion with a suitable pomp and circumstance. When the statue arrived in Bedloe Island, the pedestal was actually still incomplete, but this was part of the plan. The anchorages for Eiffel's iron frame design needed to be embedded within the pedestal in order to complete the base and ensure stability, so it didn't just topple over. I-beams made of steel served to anchor the iron frame. In April 1886, work on the frame and skin began, and reassembly went relatively quickly, though the workers assembling the frame and skin were required to dangle from ropes and cables, there being insufficient room on the pedestal to erect any sort of scaffolding. Bedloe Island had no electricity at the time, so as the statue was built, so was an electrical station to provide power for lights. Frederick Law Olmsted, one of the many designers of Central Park, supervised the landscaping of the site surrounding the statue. On October 1886, the site was ready for a grand opening, and grand it was. Only invited dignitaries were allowed on Bedloe Island for the opening ceremonies, and despite the statue being celebrated being decidedly of a female design, only 2 women were actually invited. They were the granddaughter of de Lesseps and Bartholdi's wife. That seemingly chauvinistic slight was the cause of many protests from various suffragette organisations, who actually went ahead and hired a boat to lay offshore of the island during the ceremonies, from which they shouted their protests. The male organisers of the event justified their actions by expressing concern that the women would likely be injured or taken ill in the heat or crush of the crowd. As someone who's been to many a metal concert, I call shenanigans on that one. Following the dedication, the dignitaries, which included President Grover Cleveland, who remember had once vetoed financial support for the entire project, and Bartholdi, who had championed it from the very beginning, were paraded in Manhattan. As they passed the stock exchange, they were showered with ticker tape from the officers above. This was actually New York's first ticker tape parade. In 1887, the statue was placed under the administration of the Lighthouse Board of the federal government, where it quickly proved to be pretty much useless as a lighthouse. The beam from its torch was too weak to be seen from more than a few hundred feet away. In 1901, then President Theodore Roosevelt placed it under the control of the War Department. The following year, the first reports of green patina appearing on the copper skin caused alarm, with some believing it signified corrosion. Splotchy at first, the greenish appearance eventually covered the entire statue, giving it its now well-known greenish hue. And that must have been really weird to watch. You must have made it like the statue for a little bit, had like vitiligo or something. In 1906, Congress appropriated over $62,000, about $2 million today, for the Army Corps of Engineers to address the patina and remove it and paint the statue. The Corps of Engineers refused to do this, deciding that the patina made the statue, and I quote, beautiful, as well as protected the copper underneath, and they decided to only paint the interior of the statue. They also installed an elevator to take visitors to the observation deck. They didn't want to take all the stairs. In 1916, the Black Tom explosion in nearby New Jersey caused damage to the statue. An act of German saboteurs, the explosion detonated munitions waiting to be shipped to France during World War I. The entire statue was closed to visitors for repairs, and the torch specifically has remained closed to visitors ever since. So some people can go like dignitaries and people who just, can flash the cash to make it happen. Gutzon Borglum, the designer of Mount Rushmore and Stone Mountain in Georgia, redesigned the torch in 1916, removing much of the copper and replacing it with stained glass. The design increased visibility at night, which was later increased yet further when lights were installed around the pedestal. In 1933, control of the statue was transferred to the National Park Service. Throughout World War II, contrary to what you might expect, the site did remain open to the public. By that point, it had become a backdrop for a lot of Hollywood films and was used in a lot of patriotic films and posters and propaganda and stuff to support the war effort. However, blackout restrictions did prevent it from being illuminated at night during most of the war. During the post-war years, given that the statue represented the very ideals of freedom, it became a popular place to protest issues such as immigration, civil rights, voting rights, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Iraq War, gay rights, abortion rights, and many other issues that continue to divide Americans. It has been completely renovated twice, with much of the original copper replaced. The asbestos-lined anti-galvanization pads designed by Eiffel during original construction were removed for obvious reasons. In 1986, the original torch, once displayed at the Centennial Exposition and in New York's Madison Square Garden, were modified by Borglum and removed and replaced. The modified torch, for anyone curious, was sent to the Smithsonian. The replacement torch, at the insistence of the National Park Service, is an exact replica of Bartholdi's original, though its flames are gilded with 24-karat gold. Because why not? The September 11th attacks caused the statue to be closed due to the difficulties arising from a need to evacuate Liberty Island. Bedloe Island was renamed Liberty Island in 1956, and it remained closed to the public until 2009. It also suffered closures during various government shutdowns, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. For security reasons, private boats are not allowed to dock at Liberty Island, and the only way to access the site is via contracted ferry operations, so it's hardly America's most accessible national park, and for that reason alone. But Yet, 4.5 million visitors tour the island each and every year, while millions more view the statue from ferries, private boats, and points along the shore in New York and New Jersey. Liberty enlightening the world was indeed a gift from France to the United States, but it was so much more besides. It required the input of some of the time's greatest luminaries in engineering, art, politics, industry, journalism, and more for the gift to be conceived, created, and accepted. That it was a tribute to them, as well as the thousands of people in Europe and America who ensured the statue would be admired and enjoyed for generations. So we got there in the end, didn't we, folks? And once again, I'd like to thank everybody for watching, and to the original author of this piece, Larry Holsworth. Follow them on social media below if they provided the links for us. I have been your interim host, Karl Smallwood. Yes, that's my real name. I host my own channels called Fact Fiend with Karl Smallwood and Wiki Weekends, which have an altogether more relaxed tone than this. So we drink beer rather than coffee, and I research my own articles instead of reading things submitted by, admittedly, very handsome writers. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, leave a like. If you've got something to say about it, leave a comment. In particular, my hosting style. I'm really trying to hone in on a more altogether professional demeanour, while also retaining my own playful attitude and approach to creating content. So if you've got anything to say about that, any feedback, I'd much appreciate it. You can also send me on social media if you feel so inclined, and if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe. And as always, everyone out there, have the day you all deserve. Cheers.